The woman didn't even lower her voice when she hissed, "Move, you little hood rat." She had no idea the person she just assaulted owned every plane in the fleet. We meet Kendra Reynolds, a deliberate, calculated CEO flying under her middle name to assess the culture of her newest acquisition. She settles into seat 1A of Vanguard Airways' flagship first-class cabin, dressed in an oversized charcoal hoodie and scuffed sneakers, the uniform of invisibility. The atmosphere shifts the moment Sylvia Pendergast sweeps through the cabin door. Sylvia's eyes lock onto 1A with proprietary rage, her designer heels clicking a staccato rhythm of entitlement. The tension crystallizes in the contrast. Sylvia's vocal indignation versus Kendra's silent, observational stillness as the socialite approaches with demands already forming on her lips. Kendra had learned to disappear long before she learned to dominate boardrooms. Growing up in South Chicago, invisibility wasn't a strategy, it was survival. You kept your head down, your voice quiet, your ambition buried beneath layers of deliberate mundanity. That skill, forged in cracked sidewalks and corner store arguments, had served her well through Harvard Business School, through the shipping empire she'd built from a single cargo contract, and now through the most audacious acquisition of her career. 3 weeks ago she'd purchased Vanguard Airways for $4.2 billion. The sale was structured through shell companies and offshore trusts so complex that even the airline's board didn't know who actually signed the wire transfer. Her lawyers called it strategic opacity. Kendra called it common sense. She wanted to see what she'd bought before anyone knew she was watching. The quarterly reports showed profit margins, but they couldn't show her what happened when a woman in a hoodie tried to sit in first class. They couldn't measure the temperature of respect, the weight of assumptions, the quiet cruelty that separated the served from the servant class. So here she was, flying under her middle name, K. Okafor, dressed like she'd just left a college library, watching Sylvia Pendergast's perfectly manicured hand reach for the call button above seat 1A. "This is my seat," Sylvia announced, not to Kendra but to the universe itself. Kendra didn't move. She simply looked up, her expression neutral, her hands folded over the laptop resting on her tray table. The merger data inside represented 18 months of negotiations. The woman standing over her represented everything Kendra had bought Vanguard to fix. "I don't think it is," Kendra said quietly. Sylvia Pendergast had never been told no by someone wearing sneakers. The concept itself seemed to short-circuit something fundamental in her understanding of social hierarchy. Her face flushed beneath expertly applied foundation, and her voice rose half an octave. "Do you have any idea who I am?" The question came out sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm a Diamond Elite member. I've flown 2 million miles on this airline. That seat has been mine for the last 6 transatlantic flights." Around them, first class had gone preternaturally silent. A businessman in 2C pretended to read his Wall Street Journal. A flight attendant near the galley suddenly became very interested in her manifest sheet. Everyone understood the script. The rich woman would escalate, the inconvenient passenger would be moved, order would be restored. Kendra glanced at her boarding pass, then back at Sylvia. "My ticket says 1A. Assigned at booking. Confirmed at check-in." She kept her voice level, almost gentle. "Maybe there's been a mistake with your reservation?" It was the gentleness that broke Sylvia completely. Kindness from someone she'd already categorized as beneath her felt like mockery. Her hand shot out and grabbed Kendra's backpack from the floor beside her seat. "You don't belong here," Sylvia hissed, her voice dropping to something venomous and intimate. "Economy is in the back with the rest of your kind." She hurled the backpack toward the galley. It arced through the cabin in what felt like slow motion, a 30-pound bag containing a laptop worth $10,000 and merger documents worth considerably more. It hit the cabin floor with a sound like breaking teeth. The laptop's screen shattered inside, the distinctive crack audible even through ballistic nylon. Kendra watched it fall. She didn't flinch. She simply calculated the cost of what had just broken, not in dollars but in decisions. The flight attendant who'd been studying her manifest finally moved, but not toward Sylvia. She approached Kendra with the careful, apologetic smile service workers reserve for people they're about to disappoint. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to retrieve your belongings and return to your assigned seat." Her name tag read Jennifer. Her eyes said, "I'm sorry, but you know how this works." Kendra looked at the shattered backpack, then at Jennifer, then at Sylvia, who now stood with her arms crossed, victorious and righteous. The cabin had become a theater, and everyone knew their role except Kendra, who was refusing to read from the script. "That is my assigned seat," Kendra said, pointing to 1A. "I have a confirmed boarding pass. That woman just destroyed several $1,000s of my property. And you're asking me to move?" Jennifer's smile tightened. Mrs. Pendergast is one of our most valued customers. I'm sure we can find you a comfortable seat in premium economy, and the airline will absolutely review your property damage claim. Are you serious right now? The words came out harder than Kendra intended. She took a breath, forced her voice back to neutral. She assaulted me. She destroyed my property. And your solution is to reward her with my seat. Sylvia leaned down, her breath hot and acidic. Move, you little hood rat, before I have you arrested for harassment. That's when Kendra made the call that would ground every plane in the sky. But first she needed to see exactly how deep the rot went. She needed Captain Harris to show her what she'd really purchased. She stood slowly, deliberately, and walked to the galley to retrieve her destroyed backpack. Behind her, Sylvia settled into 1A with a satisfied sigh, already snapping her fingers for champagne. Captain Michael Harris emerged from the cockpit with the confident stride of a man who'd resolved 1,000 passenger disputes. He had salt and pepper hair, 30 years of service pins on his uniform, and the expression of someone about to handle an incident with practiced efficiency. Jennifer had briefed him quickly. Difficult passenger, refused to move, disrupting service, and Harris had the situation categorized before he'd even seen Kendra's face. Miss, I understand there's been some confusion about seating, he began, his tone hovering between paternal and patronizing. But I need you to understand that interfering with a flight crew's instructions is a federal offense. Kendra turned to face him, her destroyed backpack still in her hands. I haven't interfered with anything. I was sitting in my assigned seat when that woman, she gestured toward Sylvia, who was now sipping champagne and scrolling through her phone, physically assaulted me and destroyed my property. Your flight attendant witnessed it. I'd like to know what you're going to do about it. Harris glanced at Sylvia, then at Jennifer, then back to Kendra. His eyes lingered on her hoodie, her sneakers, the careful assessment of someone trained to identify problems and remove them quickly. Mrs. Pendergast is a gold member and a priority passenger, he said, as if this explained everything. I'm sure whatever happened was a misunderstanding. Now, I'm going to ask you one more time to take an alternative seat, or I will call ahead and have federal air marshals meet this aircraft. The cabin had gone completely silent now. Even the businessman in 2C had abandoned his pretense of reading. This was the moment, the crystallization of everything Kendra had suspected about Vanguard's culture. The assumption that wealth equaled truth. That status meant immunity. That someone in a hoodie couldn't possibly belong in seat 1A. Kendra pulled out her phone. I need to make a call. Harris's jaw tightened. Ma'am, we're preparing for departure. All personal devices need to be. This will just take a second, Kendra said quietly. She dialed a number she'd memorized but never expected to use quite this soon. It rang twice before a voice answered. Operations, this is Mitchell. Mitchell, this is Kendra Reynolds. Authorization code Sierra Tango 77 Alpha. I need you to ground the fleet. Effective immediately. Global. There was a pause. Then, ma'am, can you confirm that's a full fleet ground? That's every aircraft currently. Every single one, Kendra said. And Mitchell? This plane doesn't move until I say so. She hung up. Captain Harris was staring at her like she'd just announced she was hijacking the aircraft with her mind. What the hell did you just? The plane shuddered. The jet bridge, which had been pulling away, suddenly reversed course and slammed back against the fuselage with a metallic thud. The cabin lights flickered. Someone's phone buzzed, then another, then a cascade of notification sounds as news alerts began flooding into first class. Captain Harris's radio crackled to life. Tower to Vanguard 447, you are ordered to return to gate. Repeat, return to gate immediately. We're receiving reports of a system-wide ground order. Can you confirm? Harris grabbed the radio, his face pale. Tower, this is 447. We haven't received any. He stopped mid-sentence as his own phone lit up. Then Jennifer's. Then the co-pilot appeared at the cockpit door, holding a tablet with an expression of absolute confusion. Captain, we just got an emergency directive from corporate. Full fleet ground. Every Vanguard aircraft worldwide. They're saying it came from. The co-pilot glanced at the tablet again as if rereading to make sure he hadn't hallucinated it. From the owner's office. Effective 3 minutes ago. Sylvia had stopped sipping her champagne. The businessman in 2C had his phone out, staring at a breaking news alert. Kendra could see the headline from where she stood. Vanguard Airways grounds entire global fleet, unprecedented operational halt. Harris turned to Kendra slowly, the pieces clicking together in his mind but still not quite forming a picture he could accept. Who are you? The person you just threatened to have arrested, Kendra said quietly. The person whose property was destroyed while your crew watched. The person who's been sitting in her assigned seat this entire time. She walked past him, back toward 1A, where Sylvia had gone very still, her champagne flute frozen halfway to her lips. Kendra stood in the aisle beside the seat, looking down at the woman who'd called her a hood rat 15 minutes earlier. You're going to want to move now, Kendra said. The emotional weight of what had just unfolded settled over the cabin like pressure before a storm. There's a strange intimacy in watching someone's world tilt on its axis. The moment they realize the rules they'd relied on have suddenly rewritten themselves. If you've ever felt invisible in a space that should have welcomed you, if you've ever been judged by your appearance rather than your presence, maybe you understand why this moment mattered. Maybe you understand why stories like this need to be told. Perhaps you'll stay to see where this journey leads. Sylvia's phone rang. The ringtone, Vivaldi's Spring, pretentious and tinny through the iPhone speaker, cut through the cabin silence. She answered without checking the caller ID, her eyes still locked on Kendra. Richard, not now, I'm in the middle of. Shut up and listen to me. Her husband's voice was loud enough that Kendra could hear it from 3 feet away. What the hell did you do on that plane? Sylvia's face went from flushed to pale. I don't know what you're talking about. There was this woman in my seat and I simply... Her name is Kendra Reynolds. Does that name mean anything to you? Richard Pendergast's voice had the sharp edge of a man watching his entire world collapse in real time. She's the CEO of Reynolds Global Logistics. She just bought Vanguard Airways 3 weeks ago. The woman you just assaulted, on her own airplane, is worth approximately $18 billion. She also happens to be the single largest client of my hedge fund. The champagne flute slipped from Sylvia's fingers. It hit the armrest and rolled onto the carpet, leaving a trail of golden liquid. Around them, passengers had stopped even pretending not to listen. This was better than any in-flight entertainment. That's impossible, Sylvia whispered. She was wearing a hoodie. She looked like... Like what, Sylvia? Like she didn't belong? Richard's laugh was bitter and sharp. Every Vanguard plane in the world is grounded right now. Do you understand what that means? She just cost the airline $40 million in operational losses to prove a point. And that point is you. Kendra watched Sylvia's hand tremble as she lowered the phone. The transformation was remarkable, the entitled fury draining away, replaced by the cold mathematics of consequence. This was the moment Sylvia understood that the social hierarchy she'd relied on her entire life had never been real. It had only ever been conditional, contingent on never challenging someone higher up the ladder. Harris was on his radio, getting confirmation that yes, this was real, and yes, the woman in the hoodie had just paralyzed a multi-billion-dollar airline with a single phone call. Jennifer had retreated to the galley, her face buried in her hands. Kendra settled back into seat 1A. Sylvia stood in the aisle, looking lost, her designer dress and perfect hair suddenly costume rather than armor. I think you should sit down, Kendra said not unkindly. We need to have a conversation about what's on the encrypted drive in your purse. Sylvia's eyes went wide. How did you? Because I've spent the last 3 months auditing every suspicious transaction in Vanguard's financial records, Kendra said. And your husband's hedge fund appears in those records more than 200 times. Always connected to charter bookings. Always routed through shell companies. Always carrying something that doesn't show up on any manifest. The plane had gone silent again, but this time the silence was different. Predatory. Waiting. You've been using my airline to launder money, Kendra continued. And you've been doing it with the full knowledge and cooperation of Vanguard's chairman. So here's what's going to happen next. 30 minutes later, the plane was airborne. Kendra had allowed it with a single phone call, but the tension in first class had metastasized into something darker. Harris avoided looking at her. Jennifer served drinks with shaking hands. Sylvia sat in 4B, her face blank, her phone confiscated and sitting in Kendra's lap. That's when the satellite link activated with a soft chime, and Preston Calloway's face appeared on the cabin's entertainment screen. Every screen, synchronized, unavoidable. Preston was 73, silver-haired, and radiated the kind of confidence that came from 40 years of never being told no. He'd been Vanguard's chairman for a decade, steering the airline through bankruptcies and bailouts with the skill of a man who understood that failure was negotiable if you had the right connections. Ladies and gentlemen, Preston's voice filled the cabin, smooth and practiced. I apologize for this interruption, but I have an important announcement regarding Vanguard Airways leadership. Kendra felt her stomach drop. This was happening faster than she'd anticipated. It has come to the board's attention that Ms. Kendra Reynolds, who recently acquired a controlling stake in our company, has engaged in erratic and dangerous behavior. Less than an hour ago, she unilaterally grounded our entire global fleet, costing the company and our shareholders tens of millions of dollars. This action was taken without board consultation, without operational justification, and without regard for the safety of our passengers. On the screen, Preston shuffled papers, the very picture of reluctant duty. As chairman and with the full support of Vanguard's board of directors, I am hereby exercising our fiduciary obligation to remove Ms. Reynolds from all operational authority, effective immediately. When your flight lands in Zurich, she will be met by security and escorted from company property. Kendra watched her own corporate coup unfold at 30,000 feet. It was brilliant, really. She'd overplayed her hand, acted emotionally, given them exactly the ammunition they needed. The grounding would look erratic to shareholders. Impulsive. Evidence of instability. And she was trapped in a metal tube over the Atlantic with no way to defend herself. Preston's face arranged itself into something meant to resemble regret. I want to assure our valued passengers and employees that Vanguard Airways will continue operating under stable, experienced leadership. We apologize for any inconvenience this transition may cause. Thank you. The screens went dark. The cabin erupted in whispers. Harris was staring at Kendra with something that might have been pity. Even Sylvia had perked up, sensing a shift in power back toward familiar territory. Kendra sat very still, her mind racing through options and countermoves. Preston had the board. He had the lawyers. He had physical control of the company's infrastructure. What did she have? She had a 19-year-old kid in seat 4K who'd been watching this entire drama unfold with the rapt attention of someone who understood exactly what kind of game was being played. His name was Marcus Chin, and he'd been trying very hard to be invisible. MIT dropout, freelance security researcher, flying to Zurich for a conference on encryption vulnerabilities. He had noise-canceling headphones around his neck and a laptop covered in Hacker Collective stickers that he probably thought were subtle. Kendra had noticed him during boarding, the way his eyes had tracked the cabin's security cameras, the brief moment he'd spent examining the entertainment system's interface panel, the small smile when he'd realized how poorly configured the satellite network was. She stood and walked back to row 4. Marcus looked up, and she could see him trying to decide whether to be starstruck or terrified. She sat down in the empty seat beside him. "I need your help," she said quietly. "I don't know what you think You've been watching me since we boarded. You noticed when I made the call to ground the fleet. You smiled when Preston's little show started because you realized the satellite link he used was the same network that handles all of Vanguard's operational data." She paused. "You already know how to access it, don't you?" Marcus's expression shifted from denial to something more calculating. "Hypothetically. The encryption is garbage. Legacy systems from the 2010s, barely updated. Anyone with basic knowledge of airline infrastructure could." He stopped, seeming to remember he was talking to someone who now owned said infrastructure. "I mean, theoretically. I would never actually." "Preston Calloway has been running a shadow accounting system through Vanguard's charter division," Kendra said. "Money laundering for clients like Richard Pendergast. The evidence is on encrypted drives that get passed between board members during flights, physically moved to avoid digital detection. I need you to crack Preston's encryption and pull his shadow books before we land." Marcus stared at her. That's asking me to commit several federal crimes." "I'm asking you to help me expose several federal crimes," Kendra corrected. "And in exchange, I'll make sure you never have to worry about student debt, employment, or legal consequences ever again. There's a moment in every story where the path forward requires faith. Faith in strangers, in justice, in the possibility that the truth might actually matter. It's the moment where calculation meets courage, where safety confronts necessity. These are the moments that define us, the choices that ripple outward in ways we can't predict. If this story has made you feel something, if it's sparked that recognition of power imbalanced and slowly corrected, maybe that matters. Maybe that's worth sharing. Maybe someone else needs to hear it too." Marcus looked at his laptop, then at Kendra, then at the satellite panel mounted above the galley. His fingers drummed against his armrest, a quick, nervous rhythm that she recognized as the physical manifestation of a decision being made. "Okay," he said finally. "But I'm going to need administrative access to the plane's network, and about 90 minutes of uninterrupted time." Kendra smiled. "I own the plane. I think I can arrange that." The descent into Zurich began with the gentle chime of the seatbelt sign and ended with Kendra watching a convoy of black SUVs arrange themselves on the tarmac below. She counted 8 vehicles, plus what looked like private security contractors in tactical gear. Preston had prepared a welcoming committee. Marcus had worked for 70 minutes straight, his fingers moving across his keyboard with the fluid precision of someone who thought in code. 20 minutes ago he'd looked up with exhausted triumph and said, "I'm in. And holy shit, you were right. It's all here." Now Kendra had everything. Transaction records showing $1.2 billion moved through Vanguard's charter system over 3 years, shell company formations linked to board members, encrypted communications between Preston and clients in industries ranging from pharmaceuticals to defense contracting. Marcus had pulled it all, organized it, and uploaded it to 7 different secure servers with automatic release triggers. The plane touched down. Through the window, Kendra watched Preston Calloway emerge from one of the SUVs, flanked by men in suits and others in tactical vests. He looked confident, vindicated, a man about to complete a necessary and righteous task. Harris's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been asked to remain seated while authorities board the aircraft to handle a security matter. This will only take a few minutes. We apologize for the delay." Kendra stood. Around her, passengers shifted uncomfortably. Sylvia had gone white, her hands gripping the armrests hard enough to make her knuckles bloodless. She understood that whatever was about to happen, she was implicated in it. "Ms. Reynolds," Harris said from the cockpit doorway, "I'm going to have to ask you to remain seated until—" "Captain Harris," Kendra interrupted gently, "in about 30 seconds you're going to receive a communication from Swiss Federal Police. When you do, I need you to unseal the main cabin door and step aside." "I don't take orders from—" Harris's radio crackled. A voice speaking rapid French, then switching to English. "Vanguard 447, this is Swiss Federal Police. We are boarding your aircraft under international warrant. Crew is to stand down and provide full cooperation. Confirm receipt." Harris looked at Kendra, his face a mixture of confusion and dawning comprehension. Outside, the black SUVs were being surrounded by Swiss police vehicles. Marked units with lights flashing, officers with weapons drawn, a coordinated operation that had clearly been planned in advance. Kendra walked to the door as it unsealed. The jet bridge extended. And the first person to board wasn't Preston Calloway's security team. It was Inspector Claudia Russo of the Swiss Financial Crimes Unit, followed by a dozen officers in tactical gear. "Ms. Reynolds," Russo said, extending her hand. "Thank you for your cooperation. We've received the evidence your associate transmitted. We'll need statements from you and several passengers, but I want to assure you that Chairman Calloway and his associates are now in custody." The interrogation rooms at Zurich's Financial Crimes Division smelled like bad coffee and bureaucratic efficiency. Kendra spent 4 hours giving her statement, walking investigators through the maze of shell companies, encrypted communications and offshore accounts that Marcus had uncovered. By the time she emerged, dawn was breaking over the Alps, painting the mountains in shades of rose and gold. Preston Calloway was in a different room, his silver hair disheveled for the first time in decades. His confident smile finally collapsed into something more honest. The board members who'd supported his coup were being rounded up across 3 continents. Richard Pendergast had been arrested at his Connecticut estate. Sylvia was cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence, her days of champagne and entitlement traded for testimony against her husband. Outside the station, Marcus was waiting, his laptop bag slung over his shoulder. He looked exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. "They offered me immunity," he said. "And a consulting contract with Interpol. Because apparently I'm very good at breaking into things I shouldn't be able to access." "You are," Kendra agreed. "You're also hired if you want to be. Vanguard's going to need a new head of cybersecurity. Someone who actually understands how to protect systems instead of exploiting them." Marcus grinned. "I'll think about it. Right now, I'm mostly just trying to process the fact that I helped take down a billion-dollar money laundering operation from 30,000 feet." A car pulled up. Kendra's car, sent from the Geneva office. But before she got in, she turned back toward the station, thinking about Captain Harris, about Jennifer, about all the employees who'd watched her get dismissed and disrespected because she didn't look like their idea of power. The real work was just beginning. Firing the corrupt board members would be easy. Rebuilding a culture that valued people over status, that measured worth by character rather than appearance, that would take years. But Kendra had learned a long time ago in South Chicago that invisibility was a weapon. And now she was going to teach Vanguard Airways that respect wasn't something you reserved for people who looked a certain way or carried certain credit cards. It was something you gave to every person who walked through your door. She pulled out her phone and sent a message to operations. lift the ground order, get our planes back in the air, and schedule a company-wide meeting for next week. We're going to talk about what it means to fly with dignity. The response came back within seconds. Confirmed. Welcome home, Ms. Reynolds. Kendra smiled. The sun was fully up now, burning away the morning fog. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Vanguard flights were preparing for departure, carrying passengers who had no idea that their airline had just been revolutionized by a woman in a hoodie who refused to give up her seat. She got in the car. The road ahead was long, but it was hers. And this time she was done being invisible. Thank you for taking this journey. Stories have power, not just to entertain, but to remind us that justice, though delayed, can arrive with precision. That dignity isn't negotiable. That sometimes the quietest voice in the room owns the whole building. If this resonated with you, if it sparked something or simply made you think, consider carrying it forward. These stories matter most when they're shared.